So I was scrolling through my phone the other night and I saw this pair of shoes I've been wanting for months. And right there at checkout, it said something like pay just $22 today. And I just sat there staring at that button for way too long. Because honestly, it felt like the most reasonable thing in the world. Like, yeah, I can do $22. That's nothing. But here's the thing that stopped me. I realized I had no idea what I had already signed up to pay next week or the week after that. And that's when I figured I needed to actually sit down and think this through properly, because buy now, pay later is literally everywhere right now. And I genuinely didn't know if it was helping me or quietly wrecking me. Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm basically just a regular person trying to figure out money from scratch. I don't have a finance degree. I didn't grow up with anyone teaching me this stuff. I'm just out here reading things, asking questions, and trying to figure out what actually makes sense for someone starting with basically nothing. And today we're talking about buy now, pay later, specifically Klarna, but really all of them. Because I feel like this is something a lot of us are using without fully understanding what's happening underneath. So let me start with what buy now, pay later actually is, because I think most people sort of know it without really knowing it. The basic idea is pretty simple. You're at checkout, online, or sometimes even in a physical store, and instead of paying the full price right now, you split it into smaller payments over time. Usually it's 4 payments spread across about 6 weeks. And the thing that makes it feel different from a credit card is that there's typically no interest. Like, as long as you pay on time, you're just paying exactly what the thing costs, just broken into pieces. And when you first hear that, it genuinely does sound kind of useful, especially if you're someone like me who doesn't always have a ton of money sitting in their account on any given day. The whole pitch is basically, hey, you can get the thing now and it won't crush your wallet all at once. Which, I mean, I get the appeal completely. I've been there. Something costs $80 and you just don't have $80 right now, but you will eventually. So splitting it feels like a reasonable workaround. And honestly, compared to a regular credit card, there's a real argument to be made. Credit cards right now are charging something like 20% interest in a lot of cases. That adds up so fast, it's almost offensive. So if buy now, pay later gives you 0 interest and you pay on time, on paper, it looks like a smarter option. I can see why so many people are using it. The numbers have apparently jumped a lot in recent years. More and more people are signing up, and it's not just for big purchases. People are using it for groceries now, like everyday stuff. But here's where my brain started getting a little skeptical, because whenever something sounds that convenient, I've learned to slow down and ask what's actually going on. And the more I thought about this, the more I started seeing some things that made me a little uneasy. The first thing I noticed is how weirdly easy it is to lose track. Like, think about it. If you're using Klarna for a pair of shoes, and then a week later you use it again for something else, and then 2 weeks after that for something else, you've got all these little payment schedules running at the same time. None of them feel huge individually, but they're all pulling from the same bank account. And your brain, because each one felt like a small commitment, doesn't really register the total. You signed up for something that cost $22 a month, but you've done that 4 times this month, and now it's actually almost $90 coming out before you even pay rent. I think this is something that's genuinely hard to manage. It's not that people are being careless necessarily. It's that the design of the whole thing makes it feel lighter than it is. Each little purchase feels contained, but they stack. And if your account balance dips right when one of those payments is scheduled to come out, that's when things can go sideways, because some banks will charge you overdraft fees if the money isn't there. So now you got a fee on top of a payment you were trying to use to avoid financial stress in the first place. And I think this is the core thing that tripped me up when I really tried to apply this to my own situation, because I'm working with a pretty lean budget. There isn't a lot of cushion. So when I tried to actually imagine using buy now, pay later regularly, I realized the thing I was most worried about wasn't any single payment. It was the overlap. Like, what if I've got 3 different Klarna plans running at the same time and I miscalculate? What if I forget one? I'm already not great at tracking every single thing going in and out of my account. Adding multiple overlapping mini payment schedules on top of that felt like setting a trap for myself. There's also something that I find kind of psychologically interesting about the whole thing, and I want to be honest about it because I noticed it in myself. When the price is broken up, it genuinely changes how big something feels. Like $80 feels like $80, but $20 4 times feels lighter, even though it's exactly the same amount. And that gap between how it feels and what it actually is, that's where I think people, including me, can get into trouble, because you might say yes to things you would have said no to if you saw the full price up front. The barrier is lower, so you buy more, and you end up spending more overall, even though each individual decision felt reasonable. I read something from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston that really made me think. They looked at who is actually using buy now pay later the most. And the answer was people who are already financially stretched, people with lower credit scores, people who are more likely to carry credit card balances from month to month. And I don't say that to judge anyone, because I'm pretty much in that category myself. But the point is, the people who are most drawn to this tool are often the people who can least afford for it to go wrong. And that's not a coincidence. It makes sense. If you've got plenty of money, you probably just buy the thing outright. Buy now, pay later is specifically appealing to people who are working with tight margins. And tight margins mean less room for mistakes. And here's something I keep thinking about. If something is free to use, if there's no interest charged to the buyer, then who is actually paying? The platforms are making money from the retailers. Merchants pay fees to offer buy now, pay later at checkout because it increases sales. People buy things they otherwise wouldn't, or they buy them sooner. So the business model is kind of built on encouraging spending, which is fine. Businesses exist to make money, but it means the product isn't really designed with your financial health as the main priority. It's designed to make checkout feel easier. Those are related, but they're not the same thing. Okay, so here's where I landed after thinking through all of this. I don't think buy now, pay later is purely evil. I really don't. I think there are situations where it genuinely makes sense. Like the example I kept coming back to was, what if your laptop dies and you need one for work or school? You don't have $300 right now, but you'll have it over the next month and a half. Using a buy now, pay later plan to spread that out with no interest is probably better than putting it on a credit card at 20% and paying it off slowly. In a situation like that, it's a reasonable tool. The difference, I think, is whether you're using it for something you actually need versus something you want right now, but would otherwise wait on. And also, critically, whether you have a clear picture of all the payments you've already committed to before you add another one. Because that's where the math starts to fall apart. Not necessarily on any single purchase, but on the pattern. The realization I came to is that buy now, pay later is really good at making individual decisions feel smaller and more manageable, but it doesn't actually make you wealthier or give you more money. It just rearranges when you pay. And if you're already spending close to what you earn, rearranging the timing doesn't fix anything. It can actually make it worse because now you've got financial commitments locked in for the next several weeks from things you bought in moments when the price felt smaller than it was. For me personally, starting from almost nothing, the rule I'm going to try to apply is pretty simple. Before I use buy now, pay later for anything, I'm going to add up every single payment I've already got scheduled in the next 6 weeks, not just the one I'm thinking about now, all of them. And then I'm going to look at my expected income in that same window. If there's real breathing room, okay. If I'd be cutting it close, then I wait. Because the convenience isn't worth the risk of an overdraft fee or a missed payment or the stress of watching my account drain out all at once. I also think I need to get better at just asking myself whether something is actually urgent or whether it just feels urgent because I can suddenly afford a piece of it. That impulse to say yes because $20 sounds manageable, that's something I'm genuinely working on. Because the problem isn't the platform. The problem is how easy it makes it to convince yourself a purchase makes sense. What I'm taking away from all of this is something I keep coming back to with a lot of financial advice, which is that most tools are neutral. It's the context you use them in that matters. Buy now, pay later is not automatically a trap, but it can function like one if you're not paying attention to the full picture. And I think a lot of us, especially when we're younger or just starting to figure out money, are sort of operating on autopilot at checkout. And these platforms are really good at making autopilot feel fine right up until it isn't. So I'm not swearing off it forever, but I'm committing to treating it like what it actually is, which is a short-term credit product. Not free money, not magic, just a reshuffling of when I pay. And I need to be conscious about that reshuffling before I agree to it. Now, next time, I want to look at something I've been confused about for a while, which is emergency funds. Like everyone says, have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved. And that sounds great. But when you're starting from almost zero and you can barely cover this month, what does building an emergency fund even look like in practice? Where do you put that money? Do you do it before or after you pay off debt? There are so many conflicting answers out there, and I want to actually think through what makes sense for someone in a situation like mine. That's what we're digging into next, so stick around for that one, because I think it's going to be one of those videos where the common advice turns out to be a little more complicated than it first appears.